YouTube, what's up? Back again for another daily fishing video here on Andrew Upshaw Fishing. Had a couple cool videos dropped the last few days. I had my travel vlog for the James River, and I also had my Pickwick video where I swung a 7-pounder. Hope y'all got to check those out. If y'all didn't, y'all should go check them out. I'll drop some links in here in the description so you can go see those particular videos. But today's video is going to talk about a technique that I learned a few years ago, actually quite a few years ago now. Time kind of flies, and that's called a spy bait and the technique of spy baiting. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my adventures of spy baiting and how I approach that particular technique and how you can be better the next time you're on the water. But real fast, if you have not yet, hit that sub button in the bottom right hand corner. I would greatly appreciate it. And comment below, have you ever fished a spy bait? Or do you even know what a spy bait is? Would love to hear your opinion on the fact. In the meantime, like the video. I hope you enjoy it, and I'll see you here in just a second. Alright guys, today's video is going to talk about the technique of spy baiting, using a spin bait to catch suspended bass. This has probably become one of my favorite ways to catch fish. It reminds me a lot of crappie fishing. So basically, the whole idea behind the technique is you take this particular style of bait, and I'm not going to say any one brand is better than the other. I use the Duo Realis. They're not a sponsor of mine. It's just a bait that I like. So it's about a 3 to 3.5 inch bait, and they have a larger size, which is the 90. This is the 80. I use both sizes depending on the situation, but for the sake of what I do here with this bait, this is what I would consider a drop bait. So I'm going to use this on lighter line. I'm going to cast it out, and it's going to sink slowly. And whenever it reaches that target depth, then I'm going to reel it really slow. The slower you reel this bait, the more action it has. It has like a wobbling and spinning action from the blades on the front. This is a killer technique. Now, the thing is I've learned over the years that this doesn't apply for every species of bass at all times of the year. This is a very specific time of year type of bait for all, just real particular situations. So what I've learned is when it's really cold, like wintertime, pre-spawn, actually probably more winter before pre-spawn, when they're very suspended, they are lethargic, they're hard to catch, that's a great time to throw one. You can catch largemouth, smallmouth, spotted bass, whatever it may be on the spin bait. But in the summertime, about the only time I catch largemouth on it is if the fish are extremely pressured, they're sitting up off a ledge. Using my live scope, I can use it. And that's actually kind of shortened the learning curve on the spy bait, is the fact that you don't have to actually count it down. You can just cast it out there, look at it with your live scope, and catch them. But now I'm going to talk about it in both ways because, don't get me wrong, like, it's great to have live scope and it works, but not all of you out there have it. So I'm going to teach you both ways. So when I'm casting this bait out there on a spinning rod, on a light line, and I'm using live scope, all I'm doing is watching. I don't want to cast it so far that I can't see it on my screen. So I'm going to cast it out there. I'm going to watch it drop to the ideal depth. And what I would consider the ideal depth is about a foot above where the fish are actually suspended, because they're going to feed up, but they just don't want to feed all the way to the surface. So you just never want to put it below them because they just don't look down. They're always looking straight ahead or straight up. So you always want to put that bait right above them, and you reel it extremely slow. I mean, like I said, the slower you do it, and this is the action it does through the water. So it really swims through the water column, and that is extremely deadly for those fish that are very lethargic, like I said before. But the other thing is this is extremely deadly, especially for really big fish, for smallmouth and spotted bass. I can't tell you how many big smallmouth, big giant spotted bass I've caught with this particular technique. I probably shouldn't even talk about it because it's that good. But it is if you've watched smallmouth, they are sight feeders a lot of times. So if you're in a lake that's really clear, one of the places I learned how to use this was Lake St. Clair. You could actually, they'll actually come up from 18 foot on the bottom to eat something on the surface. So, they're absolute visual sight feeders. So if they see something, they'll go eat it if it's what they're looking for. And the spotted bass, if you've watched any spotted bass tournaments or know anything about spotted bass, they have a tendency to suspend way more than other fish. They'll suspend on bridge ponds, vertical structure, man-made stuff, docks, a lot of different things. And that's where that spybait really comes into play, because you can reel it slower than most other baits and still keep it in that water column. A lot of that has to do with reel speed and size line. So your line drag is extremely important when it comes to spybaiting. Now, when it comes to this particular technique, there's a lot of things. There's a ton of colors out there in it right now. I mean, this one is like a real image yellow perch. But I'll be honest with you guys, I keep it pretty basic on my spybaits. I like a shad color. A shad color is really hard to beat, like a more transparent, has a little silver on it. I throw one that is almost clear. I like that for extremely clear water, like a Lake Mead. Smith Lake sometimes gets real clear like that. Lake St. Clair, especially on those days where it's sunny and dead calm, I want one that's way more transparent, where it just doesn't seem like it punches them in the face. But you have those overcast days and stuff, and that's when I'm gonna throw like a white, solid white, stuff like that. I mean, that's like that one right there. That solid white one works really well. But you also kind of have to match the hatch a bit. I mean, it depends on the type of the type of forage they're feeding on. Spotted bass, it's way easier because 9 times out of 10 they're eating shad. But when you're dealing with smallmouth, especially up north, you have to change your colors up. You have to go to like a gold, a silver, like that perch pattern. They even have a goby one. This is like a ghost perch. When it comes to color in this, I kind of throw whatever I feel like the fish are feeding on. Now, for all you largemouth guys, I really tend to stick to more traditional colors, white, silver. I keep it pretty basic. Spotted bass, I like to have a little bit of chartreuse in it. And sometimes I'll paint the bottom of them chartreuse with that chartreuse pin. Something about chartreuse and spotted bass, they just go crazy. Now, to kind of jump back for a second, for all you guys that don't have live scope, the way I learned how to fish the spybait is literally I went out there one day and I only had that on my deck and I tied it on for about a week straight, and I really wanted to understand it because it's such a unique deal. I started out with, actually at the time I started out with 5-pound fluorocarbon, because that's what I had learned from like the Japanese anglers that were using it, the West Coast guys. They were using like 5, 6. 6 was heavy, and that was their primary deal on really light rods. But I've kind of gravitated where I use at least 6, maybe 8 in some situations. But I use Braid. I use Braid to fluorocarbon. I think my hookup ratio is immensely better, and my landing ratio basically, because a lot of times what I learned, especially when I was counting it down, is that when you'd get to start reeling that bait, they'd hit it in the first 3 or 4 cranks. And if you're that far out with a flimsy rod and straight fluorocarbon, you're asking for a disaster there. And so I tried to lessen that the most that I could. But when it comes to counting this bait down, you're using that real light line, even Braid to fluorocarbon. I try to keep my counts between 7 and 12. The very first number I go to when I'm on a body of water, if I'm in 15 foot of water, I count it down 7. And it's a slow 7. 1, 1,002, 1,003, and so on. And I keep that 7 count, and I'll make 20 or 30 casts on an area that maybe I feel like has that particular, or where I feel like that's the depth that those fish are hanging in. And it's not necessarily going to be in 7 foot, but I just count it down to 7. And then if that's not working, I'll count down to 12. The rule of thumb here is you might break off a couple if you cast and you count to 12, because the deal is, especially if you're casting around cover, you're going to have a tendency to hang up. So you'll learn real fast what number not to count it to, and that's probably one of the most important things. Is so if you're fishing around submerged grass out there in 15, 20 foot of water, and you start snagging the grass real bad, you need to lessen your count by 1 to 2 seconds. So if you do that, you want that bait to always gravitate over the cover. So like whether it's over grass, over a brush pile, over a cane pile, around a dock piling, or bridge piling, wherever maybe you think those fish are suspended. And that's the way you need to do it. One thing that I've learned on bridge pilings, for instance, those fish don't suspend as deep as we actually think they do. They only push deeper when we get over the top of them. So if you stay way back and you cast that bridge piling, a 7 count actually might be too deep. You might even only need to count to about 4 seconds. and you'll actually fish that effectively, because a lot of those bridge piling fish actually sit towards the surface way more than you ever give them credit for. So we've talked about how to fish it, where to fish it, and stuff like that. This time of year is a fantastic time to fish it. The summertime is so good, especially smallmouth. I mean, right now is actually when they're coming off the beds, or maybe even some are still spawning, but not as many. So when they get to really feeding up, they eat the spybait. I think so. We have a lot of big tournaments coming up. I have Oneida coming. I have St. Lawrence River. But you look at the Bass Pro Tour, they have a big one at, like, I think St. Lawrence. The elites go to St. Lawrence. You're going to see this bait come into play a ton in the next couple months. And so this is kind of a brief overview. Now, as far as gear goes, it's actually kind of weird. I fish it a little different. So when it comes to the 80 size, so this size right here, there's two actual ones that they have. They have the 80 and then the 80G fix, which is a bit heavier. I still throw it on the same size line, do all that stuff. It just makes casting a bit easier. I throw it on a Team Loose Custom Pro Dock Sniper rod. This is a 610 medium light, I think, actually. No, it's a medium extra fast. And this is the same rod that I throw a wacky rig on a lot. This is the same rod that I won at Cherokee with. But this has a tremendous amount of tip. It's perfect for this technique, but a lot of backbone. And that's what I'm looking for in this particular deal. I want a 300 size reel. I want that reduction in line twist if I can. A 10-pound yellow braid, because you want to be able to detect those bites. Sometimes your line will jump when you're reeling it, and they'll be running straight at you. So you need to be able to catch up with those fish. And so that's what I use on the 80. So the 90 size is very unique, because I don't use it all the time. I use it for spotted bass or herring lakes, or other places I might use it is on ledges. Like, so if I'm fishing really big fish and I'm on, like, Lake Chickamauga and the ledge bite is really terrible and I know the fish are suspending, that's when I pull out the 90 size. I will actually up my line size to 8-pound line. 8, actually 10 in some cases, but 8 to 10. And I'll put it on a 5-to-1 gear ratio BB1 in a 7-foot cranking rod. So like a medium action cranking rod, and throw it on bait casting gear. Guys, you can cast this thing like a bullet. Like, you can cast it forever. The only problem is you got to reel it in with that 5-to-1. I use the 5-to-1 because I can really slow it down the speed that it needs to go, and I think that's really important in this particular technique. Now, not all techniques are out there are like that, but in this case, a 5-to-1 is what I prefer. You can get away with a 6-to-1, but you've got to really slow your hand down. I mean, just like snail's pace, and sometimes we can't all do that. But guys, that's a real quick overview of how I fish my spybait. I hope y'all learned something from this video. I've been wanting to do this one for a while, but I've kind of put it on the back burner a bit. But I think it's time for y'all to learn a little bit about this particular technique, and I hope y'all can catch them the next time y'all go out there and throw a spybait. See you guys.